to warn you with logic impart basic science and truth says we are breaking apart. Our balance has toppled.
Hey, what's up everybody? This is Agascles Stamus, aka Game Logic on Twitch, here with another Tech Talk. We're kind of starting the Tech Talk series over because one of the things that I've done of late is I created a pretty exhaustive and thorough check sheet that I use, that I go through whenever I'm setting up for a live stream. So I kind of wanted to walk the Tech Talks back and be able to talk through each one of those steps so that people would know some of the meat behind them. Now, we've done some deep dive propeller head Tech Talks before. We've talked about entropy, we've talked about jitter and latency, and packet loss, and high level network things like that. Now we're going to be kind of going procedurally through the exact chronology that I go through at least every time I'm setting up for a live stream. So tonight, the first thing that is on that knee board is hardware configuration. It's kind of a group of 11 to 13 steps, and specifically what we're going to be talking through is the first step, which is setting up your capture card. Now, again, this is just the hardware side of it, and so one of the things we're going to be going through is kind of some of the hardware characteristics of capture cards and their capabilities, and then I'll talk quickly through their setup. There are more extensive videos in the library on rounding off infinity that actually have me physically walk through a setup and actually plugging all the cables in. That's a very specific thing that some people needed, and so that's out there if you need it. Today's going to be a little more basic, and what I'm going to specifically be talking over is the MiraBox HSV321 capture card, as well as the AverMedia Live Gamer Portable 2 Plus capture card. And one of the big reasons this was spurred on was because the whole reason that I do the Tech Talks is I get very concerned. One of my things that I try to do is I try to put a lot of information out there so that people understand where and when they have choices. One of the things that I find concerning about the streamer community is that there's a lot of word of mouth, and sometimes it kind of becomes monoculture, monosolution. And so somebody hears one thing from a big streamer, and then that catches like wildfire and becomes the single point, one and only solution, and that's why everybody on the planet only has the Elgato HD60 capture card, or that's why everybody only has the Audio Technica AT2020 microphone. But there's lots of options out there, and what I've spent a lot of time doing over the last few years is specifically going out and testing a lot of those pieces of equipment, putting them in different configuration packages, and seeing how they work together, so that that information be put out there so people know that they have options and choices. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk through two of these capture cards. Again, one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this segment is because recently I've seen a lot of people buying capture cards, particularly in the wake of Amazon Prime Day, and a lot of people went after the Elgato HD60s. And the Elgato HD60s is a fine capture card. There are other options, and there are pros and cons to those options that people should be aware of so that you can think through them. One of those options is this card, the MiraBox HSV321 USB 3.0 capture card. This is a card that is sold by Amazon, and probably the primary pro of this card is that it's the least expensive, best performing, most reliable capture card that I've used. And again, I've reviewed somewhere on the order of magnitude of 50 to 20 capture cards. This typically retails right now for $99, and other cards that are down at that price tend to often be unreliable or unintuitive on exactly how to use them. This has none of those characteristics. It's got an HDMI output on one end, and on the other end it has an HDMI input and a USB 3.0 port. Its USB 3.0 uses this braided cable, which just features two USB A style connectors on both ends. So you don't have any kind of wonky or really tiny connectors to contend with. The MiraBox HSV321 is capable of capturing at 1080p 60 frames per second, so you can get pretty much your best and highest quality video for you Twitch streamers as well as for you YouTube streamers, provided that you pair it with a relatively powerful streaming PC that's capable of pushing that resolution and those frame rates at the maximum bandwidth that they allow, which today for YouTube is 9 megabits per second, and for Twitch is 6 megabits per second. So like I said, the main reason you would go after this card is a lot of people feel, or the main reason people don't have capture cards when they don't have them is because they are not super excited about the cost. This gets you in at a very low price point, and in particular, one of my things is, like, if you don't know that you're going to stick with streaming, and you don't know if you're going to push to monetize, or you're not sure exactly where you're going to go with it or how it kind of fits into your life, don't spend $180 on a capture card. Maybe spend $99 on a capture card. One of the things, also, other things that I love about this is on my high reliability list. Actually, I have two of these, and the reason is because, again, I set up a lot of different streaming configurations with different PCs and different components. This is one of those capture cards, and there aren't that many. This is one of those capture cards that works perfectly and exactly the way it's supposed to work on multiple different PCs with Intel CPUs and AMD CPUs and RTX GeForce cards and GTX GeForce cards and all sorts of other mixtures and types in between. It's just one of those rock solid, high reliability performers. Now, every capture card that's out there is going to periodically, between it and OBS, every once in a while you're going to need to unplug the capture card and plug it back in. That happens. It happens pretty rarely with this one, and the other thing I'll say in terms of reliability is a lot of times when that does happen with other capture cards, I sometimes have to do what I call the herky-jerky dance, which is I have to unplug the cable, plug it back in, or unplug it, wait 10 seconds, plug it back in. Sometimes I have to sign out of the PC and sign back in to just get all the drivers to reboot. I have to go through this 3 or 4 tier troubleshooting process to sometimes get the capture card hooked by OBS again. This thing, I've never had to do anything more than unplug the USB and plug it back in. Pretty amazing card, particularly for $99. One of the other things I'll mention about capture cards that you need to do and you need to be aware of, when you go to Amazon, typically what you're going to find is that, I know for typical purchases on Amazon, what I do is I say I have a minimum purchase rating requirement of 4.0 or above. Typically, I don't buy anything on Amazon unless it has an average customer review of 4.0 or above. And I typically look for products that have, a robust number of reviews. When you go to look for capture cards, I'm pretty sure the only capture card you're going to find with a 4.0 rating or above is the Elgato HD60s. That is because every once in a while there are categories. Smart watches and fitness bands are another example. There are just some categories that nobody is satisfied with in general. They tend to track lower than other product categories. Capture cards is one of them. Normally, when you go to look for a capture card, you need to take a look. I would suggest you take a look at things that might be 3.7 or 3.8, and then come to, I would say, Rounding Off Infinity, or follow me on Twitter and ask me, hey, is this capture card, even though it's rated a 3.7 or 3.8, is it any good? One of the big reasons people wind up rating the cards low and pulling the reviews down is because of two major missteps. The first time you hook up a capture card, and I'm going to give you this rule, and then I'm going to immediately make an exception to it. The first time you hook up a capture card, great Scott, do two things. Go and get the firmware update that the vendor has posted on their page before you do anything, and then get the latest drivers for the thing. In most cases, these capture cards and the way systems and software integration is right now for these technologies, these are not things that are going to work well if you just connect them and expect them to work out of the box. They need to get firmware updates, and they need to have the latest drivers. As we go on through the series, we'll talk about particular vendors and the way those drivers are packaged. A lot of the vendors package the drivers embedded within their proprietary software application for streaming and video capture. So even though you run OBS, you might have to download RE Central 4. You might have to download Game Capture HD. You might have to download whatever Hoppage's software application is, because the drivers aren't provided separately from that. So you just install the application, you bury the application in a folder, you delete the shortcut from your desktop, whatever. For the most part, and there are some fringe cases, you don't have to run that proprietary application, but you need to download it so that you get the driver, so that when you pull up OBS and you select it, OBS is using the latest drivers. Again, there are some exceptions to that. One of those exceptions is this one. I don't actually know who makes this thing. It's a manufacturer in China it's just a generic ASIC. There's nothing like super special about it. I'm sure the exact same PCB is inside other capture cards under a different branding name. Just like Yeti cups and Ozark cups come right off the exact same production line and just get stamped with a different brand when it gets to the end. So you're not going to find a firmware update for this. At least I have not been able to track one down. There is no associated software for the drivers. This is the one exception to the rule where you actually plug this thing up and it should just work out of the box without you having to go do the herky-jerky dance and pull down any additional software components. The second card, and so to hook this thing up, all you're going to do is, as I talk about in other videos, you're just going to take your HDMI output out of whatever device you're live streaming, your console, another PC. You're going to take that HDMI output out of either the console or the GPU on a PC, plug it into here. This is the HDMI input. You're going to run this USB over to your streaming PC into any USB 3.0 port. Part of what a capture card does is it just acts as a pass-through. So the only thing you're doing to get video over to the streaming PC is plugging in that USB 3.0 over to the streaming PC and plugging the output cable of the game device into the input side. The pass-through part of it comes where you take an HDMI cable and run it out of this output port and then run it to the display that you're going to actually play the game on. That's it. That's all you do. The second card I want to talk about today is the AverMedia Live Gamer Portable 2 Plus. This is another one of my absolute favorite capture cards for different reasons. This thing is one of my high reliability cards because it's dead simple, it's super inexpensive, and it works all the time. This pretty much does the same thing, but it's more expensive. It also has a lot more capabilities. And this is where I talk about these classes of capture cards that I feel like people need to be aware of. And you need to be aware of very specific nuances in streaming and things that are enablers to your productivity and help you get production done fast, help you set up for production quickly, and make production less complicated. 99% of the time, a lot of the questions that I answer is streamers who don't understand how a given device routes its audio, and therefore they don't understand how to connect it. There are things like this that help you with that make those things easier to understand. So let me start right off the bat with the fact that the best thing about this kind of capture card, and several capture cards have this, is it features an onboard, having a hard time, I always struggle with this, it features an onboard integrated mixer. And that's huge, huge. So what it has here is on the front panel, it has ports for you to route an audio cable from your game controller in, and then an output to go to your gaming headset, if that's how you're going to game, if that's your use case. The point of that is one of the biggest things that I spend a lot of time answering questions about is how do I get my party chat into my live stream? And how do I make sure that my party can hear me when I'm talking? There are normally what we wind up doing and have historically done is we use two different microphones. You don't have to do that with this. Now, sometimes you're still going to want to use two different microphones because a lot of times you don't want your party to have to listen to you talking to your chat when they may not care less about what you're talking to your chat about. By the same token, a lot of us have game party members who are quite loud, and sometimes having them in your stream chat maybe isn't the best thing. But the point is that this gives you options and flexibility. So what you do is you run a 3.5mm male to 3.5mm male connector stereo jack cable from your controller over to this input port, and then you just connect your headset, your gaming headset, over to this output port. Now, those lines need to be 4-pole 3.5mm connectors, which is a different type of connector than is on your headphones. It's a type of connector that comes with a wired headset that you might use with your smartphone. We can talk about that later. If you have questions about that, hit me up and let me know. The other thing that this has, and that one of the reasons why I really like it, is it also then has a volume balance control here to change the balance between the in-game audio and your microphone voiceover commentary audio, so that, again, one of the biggest problems, one of the things I struggle with and try and pay the most attention to is the audio mix balance between my voiceover commentary and the in-game audio. I want people to be able to hear the in-game audio, but I don't want it to drown out my voiceover commentary, and vice versa. This allows you to change it right on board. This capability, right, this combined capability of having all of your audio managed and routed through one device, and then the ability to control it, is the main reason why I typically recommend that streamers actually use a hardware mixer, like the Behringer Xenix 302 USB mixer that I use, or the Go XLR mixer, because it allows you to bring all of your audio into one place and then manage it on the device. So you don't have to keep running back and forth between your gaming chair and your OBS setup if you're using a 2 PC setup, for instance, or like I do if you use a streaming PC with your consoles. You can manage it all right here. That, again, is super powerful and huge. The other thing this capture card does is it allows you to utilize it with a PC or in standalone mode or as a storage device. It has a micro SD slot here on the back that takes micro SD cards. I think up to, I can't remember exactly, maybe up to 256 gigabytes. I have a 128 gigabyte card in the back here. Depending on what bit rate you're recording at, you should need that much more space for this. If you're using this in the standalone configuration, you're probably gaming on a laptop, then that's how you can do a game capture. It has this symbol here actually illuminates for when you're, it's a status light indicator, and it actually has a push button if you want to kick off AverMedia's proprietary software application, RE Central. I think it's RE4 Central right now. And then you can click that to actually start it and start game capture or live streaming from here. Your HDMI in and HDMI out ports are on the back, and then you have the USB connection for power and data transfer. This comes with a fairly lengthy cable, which is great. I think it's about probably 5-6 feet. It actually uses micro USB for connecting to the device, and then USB-A to connect to your PC. I'm a fan of the newer capture cards that are using USB-C, but I do really like the fact that this is a braided cable and it's really long, because again, I do cable runs where I'm on the other side of this computer table playing on a console in a gaming chair over there, but here is my streaming PC. And so I have to run the capture card. I've got the capture card on the other side, and the cable needs to be long enough to get to the USB ports on the back plane of the streaming PC here. AverMedia is probably, if you can gain the wherewithal and situational awareness to think about options other than the Elgato HD60s, AverMedia is probably the line of cards that I recommend you look at first. They have a wide range of products that have a lot of different capabilities. Another big reason why I love this card is I've spent the money on a 4K TV. I have the PlayStation 4 Pro and the Xbox One Scorpio. They're capable of 4K. One of the things I've historically hated about streaming is I have this 4K stuff, but when I live stream, up until recently, capture cards only could pass through things at 1080p, and so I have this 4K capability, but if I'm live streaming, I can only watch it in 1080p. This card, as you can see on the label here, does 4K pass-through. And so even though I'm live streaming at 1080p, I'm watching it on my screen at 4K. Now, it does 4K pass-through. It does not pass through HDR, and there's a lot of philosophy and belief out there that HDR is actually the thing that makes your picture look better, so you won't get that, but at least you'll get it in 4K. Again, obviously, I think in order to hook this up, all you do is you run the HDMI output of your console into the HDMI input port here. You then run an HDMI cable out of this port over to your gaming display where you're going to play your game, and you hook up the USB cable that I showed you on screen here and run it over to your streaming PC. We will talk in another series about software configuration and setup to then configure OBS to pull this into a scene as a source and actually use it. Again, some of those videos are already out on Rounding Off Infinity, but we'll be going through them again. If you have any questions, by all means, let me know. Ask me on Twitter. If I have comments enabled on this video, post comments and questions about this or anything else that has to do with streaming technology and how you go about setting up. So again, the key thing to take away from here, this is the first talk through hardware configuration and setup in preps to live stream using a capture card. Whenever I go to do a new live stream setup, that is the first thing that I set up physically, is I get all the cables connected for the HDMI I/O and the USB connection from the card to the streaming PC. That's the first step. That's what we talked over today, as well as different options that you have to actually select that capture card when you want to purchase it in the first place. So once again, my name has been Stamus, also known as Game Logic on Twitch. If you have any questions, hit me up. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe out there, play the games that you like and stream the games that you love. That's going to do it for me. Good luck, good night, and good gaming. I'm out of here.